So I'm Susan Phillips. I'm from the FutureGEN project, and we examine gender, health, and care among older adults. And our group views gender as what happens at the intersection of sex and various social locations. So gender is therefore a social determinant of health and not a characteristic that can be measured or described at an individual level. And the challenges we address all apply to quantitative research, generally using survey data. So I'm going to present 3 challenges, but only the third is one that I'll develop for today. The first is the drift from gender to gender identity in calls for research, data collection, analysis, discussion, and activism. And as I said, I'm just naming this. It's one we discussed, but it didn't include itself in our actual project. The second is the question of might survey data have embedded gender bias because men and women interpret and respond to specific questions differently. And so we explored subjective ratings of health, gathered 900 survey responses from adults, and found that somewhat to our surprise, there were very limited sex and gender differences in the interpretations of this question. Now I come to the main one, and it's been nicely set up already, the question of inserting multidimensionality into health research, or this is about intersectionality. So usual quantitative designs, such as regression analyses, assess variability or heterogeneity between groups, but they assume homogeneity within a group. And studying interactions or intersections of various characteristics is a way of recognizing that the impact of being a woman of color, for example, may be different from the additive impacts of being a woman and being of color. Quantitative intersectional approaches are relatively new, particularly in sciences and in medicine. And there is ongoing discussion as to best methods. It's already appeared here this morning. There's even discussion of whether these generally more challenging designs add enough meaning to justify the challenge of including these designs. So ultimately, looking for all social intersections will eliminate groups, as there will be no 2 individuals who share the exact same social locations and experiences. And this would mean the end of quantitative analyses, as quantitative analysis is based on measuring variability across groups. It would also make gender an individual characteristic, and we reject that definition, we being FutureGEN. So how did we approach this challenge? We've tried to address multidimensionality and heterogeneity within and across social strata in all our work, but we do continue to debate the merits and shortcomings of the various intersectional approaches described in recent health research. And I really mean it when I say we debate them within our group. There's no consensus as to best methods or whether methods are necessary at all. In general, our findings have been that an intersectional approach sometimes, but doesn't always, add meaning to the usual method of looking at, for example, men and women separately. So here are a few of the approaches we've taken to this challenge. We started with a systematic review of whether and what research methods the interconnected effects of sex and social locations have on adults' health. And we hoped that this would guide our work. In general, it didn't, as most of the 732 papers reviewed controlled for sex and social circumstances rather than studying intersecting traits as predictors of health. We then tested one of the stronger intersectional methods found in the review and looked at characteristics of Canadians receiving formal and informal care in the home. This was decision tree analysis, and it did support an intersectional approach and was useful because it didn't make assumptions about who might or might not use care. We I'll skip what we found. We then did an age cohort analysis disaggregated by sex, and this enabled us to account for, although not to name, socio and economic experiences specific to people of set age groups living through particular time periods. So among other things, we demonstrated that age could be considered a social location in addition to an individual characteristic, as it's a proxy for a cohort effect. I'm out of time. You can read the last one on the slide. Thanks.